diving deep today into a single chapter from the Bible, 1 Chronicles chapter 5.
Yeah, and our goal here, is to look beyond what might seem like just names and places. There's a real narrative, some powerful insights hidden in there. What can this text tell us about these specific tribes, about their journey?
All right, let's unpack this then. Chapter 5, it focuses on 3 tribes who settled east of the Jordan. That's Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Starting with Reuben. He was the firstborn of Israel, Jacob's first son.
He was, yeah. But the text immediately points out something crucial. Reuben lost his rights as the firstborn.
Right.
And it wasn't like arbitrary. The text is very specific. It was because he defiled his father's marriage bed, a serious offense.
So major consequence for that action.
Exactly. And here's something really interesting, maybe even counterintuitive if you think about tribal power. Those birthright privileges, they didn't automatically go to Judah, the tribe that later produced kings.
Huh. Where do they go?
The text says they were given specifically to the sons of Joseph. It signals perhaps a different kind of value system or consequence being highlighted, not just about raw power.
Okay, so Reuben's line is listed, but without that top status. We get names like Hanok, Palu, Hezron, Carmi, and then later down the line, a guy named Bera. Is he important?
Well, Bera kind of jumps out because the text connects him to a major historical event. It says he was a leader of the Reubenites who was carted off into exile by Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria.
Oh.
So it's not just a name in a list. It connects this family line directly to, well, the big political events of the time. It sort of foreshadows what's coming for these tribes.
Gotcha. And where did the Reubenites actually live? What was their territory?
The description sounds pretty vast. It goes from Aroer, stretching over towards Nebo and Balmeon, and then pushing east, like right up to the edge of the desert near the Euphrates River.
Wow, that's a huge area. Why so far east?
Simple reason given, their livestock. Their herds had apparently grown massive in the Gilead region, so they just needed more and more pasture land.
So prosperity, at least in terms of livestock, was a big factor.
Definitely a defining feature early on.
And they weren't just farming. The text mentions conflict back in King Saul's time. They fought the Hagrids.
That's right. They clashed with the Hagrids in that eastern territory and defeated them, establishing themselves there.
Okay, makes sense. Now, moving on to the tribe of Gad, they settled nearby.
Right next door, yeah. Their main area was Bashan, and it says their territory stretched as far as Selica.
And leaders are mentioned.
Yes, chiefs in Bashan like Joel, Shapham, Janai, Shaphat. And it traces some family lines back, mentioning an Ahi son of Abdiel as like the head of their family group.
And their land included Gilead, Bashan, and it specifically mentions pasture lands of Sharon.
Right, again with the pasture lands. Suggests livestock was key for them too. And there's another little historical marker tucked in there.
Oh, yeah.
It says these genealogies, these records, were compiled or officially entered during the reigns of King Jotham of Judah and King Jeroboam of Israel.
So that helps date when this list was considered important enough to write down.
Exactly. Gives us a historical anchor for the record itself.
Okay, and the third group over there, east of the Jordan, the half-tribe of Manasseh.
Yeah, the half-tribe. They were also numerous, it says, and settled north of the others, from Bashan up towards Mount Hermon, which it also calls Baal Hermon, or Sinner.
And their leaders.
Also listed. Epher, Ishi, Eliel, Azriel, Jeremiah, Hodaviah, and Jadil. But what's interesting here is the description of these men.
Oh, so?
The text calls them brave warriors, famous men, and heads of their families. It paints a picture of, really capable, respected leadership within that half-tribe.
Right. So, okay, these 3 groups, Reuben, Gad, half of Manasseh, they're settled east of the river, covering huge territories, apparently wealthy, and led by strong figures. The text even gives a number for their combined military strength.
It does, a very specific number. 44,760 men ready for military service.
That's a formidable force.
And it clarifies they weren't just, guys who could be drafted. They were described as able-bodied, trained fighters handling shield and sword using bows.
Yeah.
Battle ready.
And they definitely saw battle again. There's another conflict mentioned, also against the Hagrids, but this time with allies like Jetur, Naphish, and Nodab involved too.
Yes, and this account. This is where the text gives us a really crucial piece of insight, I think.
What's that?
Well, it doesn't just say our guys won because they were stronger. It explicitly states they were helped in the fight, that God handed the Hagrids and their allies over to them.
Okay.
And the text gives a specific reason, because they cried out to him during the battle and he answered their prayers because they trusted in him.
Wow. Okay, so that's a direct link being made. Prayer, trust leading to victory.
Absolutely undeniable in the text. It wasn't just about the 44,000 soldiers or their skills. It's presented as divine intervention, a direct response to their faith in that moment of crisis.
That really shifts the perspective on their success.
It does. It's maybe one of the core messages embedded in this whole chapter, right alongside the names and places. Military success, their earlier prosperity with livestock, strong leaders. The text seems to frame these as flowing from their relationship with God, specifically that trust in calling out for help.
And the victory itself was huge. The list of spoils is just staggering.
Yeah, the numbers are wild. 50,000 camels, 250,000 sheep, 2,000 donkeys, and 100,000 people taken captive.
100,000 people.
Plus, it adds, many others were killed, with the specific note, because the battle was God's.
So it really doubled down on that idea. This wasn't just human conflict.
From the chronicler's viewpoint, absolutely not. It was seen as divinely directed, and after this huge win, they occupied the land they conquered, solidifying their hold on that vast eastern territory. Until the exile, that is.
Right. So they have it all, it seems. Land, wealth, military power, even this history of God helping them directly because of their faith. They should be totally secure, incredibly blessed. But as you hinted earlier with Beer's fate, the story doesn't end there.
No, it takes a sharp downward turn. And the text introduces it very bluntly. But they were unfaithful.
Despite everything.
Despite everything, all those blessings, that clear experience of answered prayer, they fundamentally failed in their loyalty.
What did that unfaithfulness actually involve? What did they do?
The text explains it was unfaithfulness to the God of their fathers, and specifically they prostituted themselves to the gods of the peoples of the land, the peoples God had destroyed before them.
So idolatry. They started worshiping the local Canaanite gods.
Exactly. Adopting the religious practices of the very people they had displaced, practices totally opposed to the covenant, the agreement they had with the God of Israel. Essentially, they turned their back on the source of all their previous success and security.
And according to this account, breaking that loyalty, that covenant, had, well, predictable consequences.
Severe consequences, yeah. The text draws a direct line from this spiritual betrayal to their ultimate downfall. It says, "So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria," who it clarifies is also Tiglath-Pileser, the same king mentioned way back with Beer's exile.
Right, bringing it full circle.
Yeah. So the Assyrian invasion isn't presented merely as, geopolitics unfolding. It's framed as a direct consequence initiated by God because of their unfaithfulness.
And that action, using Assyria, led to the end for them in that land.
Complete loss, yes. The text says the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh were all taken away, deported.
Taken where?
To specific places. Hala, Habor, Hara, and the river goes on. And the chapter concludes with this really stark final statement about them, where they are to this day.
Wow. Just gone. The end of their story in that region.
A definitive end to their prosperity, their independence, everything they had built east of the Jordan.
So, looking back at the whole arc in 1 Chronicles 5, we see these tribes start out with blessings, land, wealth. They achieve major military victories, and the text explicitly credits their faith and God's help for that success. And
then they lose it all, completely wiped out as a presence in that land. And the reason given, again, just as explicitly, is their unfaithfulness, turning to worship other gods.
So what is this narrative, tucked away in what looks like a historical record, really tell us? What's the takeaway?
Well, it presents a really potent, almost stark cause and effect relationship, doesn't it, between their spiritual state and their physical, worldly outcome. It seems to challenge any idea that just having wealth or power or even having experienced God's blessing in the past guarantees anything about the future if that core relationship, that faithfulness, is abandoned.
Yeah.
The text makes it crystal clear, at least from the author's perspective, that their turning away from God wasn't some minor slip-up. It was the reason, the direct catalyst for their total collapse and exile.
We've traced the lineage, the expansion, the victories, and the final exile of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, all laid out in 1 Chronicles chapter 5.
And considering how the text emphasizes they won that huge battle because they trusted God and cried out to him, and then later says they were exiled because they were unfaithful, what does that stark contrast suggest? What's the central message about maybe what constitutes real security or blessing, according to this writer? Definitely gives you something to think about.